The Baltimore Ravens cannot get the job done in Week 17 against the Pittsburgh Steelers, losing 16-13. We talk about the offense, the defense, what it means for the team, playoff situations, and more coming up next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I am your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. We are here, of course, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for tuning in, even in a loss, and making us your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms, including over on YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is presented by Ultimate Football GM. If you ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM, managing your football franchise, this game is definitely for you. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in all caps in the game. And we are back now. It is a unfortunate non-victory Monday, a really, really unfortunate one for Baltimore. They fall 16-14 to Pittsburgh, and it was a game that they honestly could have won in multiple areas, but much of the same. We have seen this before. It's been the story for Baltimore for many weeks of the season where one thing will pop up here and there. It seemed like a lot of the stuff kind of plagued Baltimore and haunted them in this game overall. We'll talk about offensive execution, execution in terms of play calling for the Ravens, situational awareness for coordinators, for coaches, for players, and everybody. We'll talk about end of half defense, end of game defense, penalties. There's a lot to talk about in this game, and it's bad because Baltimore falls now to 10-6 on the season, and pretty much they have to hope, in terms of if they want to win the AFC North, that Cincinnati loses to Buffalo in the Week 17 Monday Night Football game coming up here tonight. And then you hope that Baltimore can somehow will a win in Cincinnati against a team that has been pretty red hot over the course of the last couple months here. So we'll focus on the Pittsburgh game a little bit here. Obviously, we'll talk about the offense in the first segment, defense in the second segment. Then we'll move into the actual playoff implications for stuff going on here. So we'll talk about all that. Let's first start with the offense. And look, I mean, for the Baltimore run game in particular, that's where you wanted to see Baltimore dominate. It was on the ground. And I thought J.K. Dobbins had a really good game. He averaged 5.5 yards per carry, 17 carries, 93 yards. And it's kind of what we talked about a little bit with Spencer Schultz on our Wednesday episode last week, where I think we're so spoiled as people watching the Ravens. J.K. Dobbins averaging 5.5 after, he's averaged like 9.6 and 7 and all that. We're thinking, 5.5 yards per carry. That's so bad, but it's actually really, really good. Dobbins had multiple big runs. He was carving up the Steelers defense. His long was 22, but he had multiple ones where he either broke to the outside or refused to go down on first contact. I thought that was a very positive thing for the Ravens. Interestingly enough, though, J.K. Dobbins, this was his first game ever in the NFL with over 15 carries. He had, I believe, 4 games before this with 15 carries on the nose. He went for 17 on Sunday night. So good for him in terms of getting that workload. He definitely seems to be, maybe he's not all the way back yet, but he seems to be improving each and every week there. But the curious thing is in that Gus Edwards only got 3 carries for 2 yards. I really don't know what was going on with Gus Edwards in terms of where his workload went. So he only averaged 0.7 yards per carry. Tyler Huntley, 7 for 24. That was 3.4. And then Andy Isabella got a little end around. He gained 1 yard on that. So Ravens averaged 4.3 yards per carry as a team. The Ravens passing wise, though, Tyler Huntley, 14-21, 130 yards, 120 when you factor in sacks, 6.2 yards per pass. There you have 1 touchdown and obviously the 1 bad interception at the end, where after the game, Tyler Huntley just said, when he was asked about what he was looking to who was looking to find, who was throwing to, he said, shoot somebody, someone has to go out there and make a play. And a lot of people were just like, no way he said that. But I don't know, the way the offense just seemed out of rhythm for a lot of the game, where they strung together a couple of nice drives. But the way that 2022 ended and honestly went for Baltimore, same story for the majority of the game here in 2023 is Baltimore in the red zone. in the red zone. They were 1 of 2 in the red zone. It started off bad. They ended up getting the touchdown at the end there in their last red zone attempt. So 50%, you take that as a percentage. But again, this was a 3-point loss, and Baltimore could have easily punched that ball in the red zone to win the game. They left 4 points on the board there in a 3-point loss. It's stuff you don't like to see. Offensively, I thought Baltimore honestly was converting well early in the game, but then their third down conversion percentage late in the game, late game execution, late game play calling as well, it just was not up to par. Some of those play calls, I was just like, what are we doing? What are we doing here for the Ravens, trying to, again, protect going into this fourth quarter, protect a lead. The Ravens, they were up in this game, and then the Ravens do not score in the fourth quarter. They score 3 points in the third quarter. Baltimore had 5 offensive possessions in the second half of this game. They went field goal, punt, interception. It's not going to get the job done. It's not going to get the job, especially against the team in Pittsburgh that has been resilient. They have found a way. They needed so much for them. A couple weeks ago, they needed so much for them to happen. They have not given up. They're a team. Obviously, Mike Tomlin has his guys right. And for the Ravens, I don't know what it has been for this offense ever since the bye week. And by the way, the Ravens need Lamar Jackson back really badly. Like, obviously, right? Hot take or something, right? But they need him back. They need him back really badly. But the offensive issues began before Lamar Jackson. And look, getting Lamar Jackson back doesn't fix everything. Even something like firing Greg Roman, which I don't think they're going to do right now, but firing Greg Roman would not change everything. There are multiple deep-rooted issues within this offense, within everything, execution-wise from coaches, execution-wise from players. You have situational stuff. We saw that all creep up where it was like, well, why are you running here when you should be passing it? Why are you passing it here when you should be running it? Why is this a play call? Why is the ball not getting into this guy's hands? It all came back, and it all was just, it all got summed up in this perfect mess of something you just do not want to see. Baltimore's offense, since coming out of the bye, I tweeted a lot of stats after the game, and whatever you're looking at here, I think that what the Ravens have is an offense right now that since the bye week, averaging 14.1 points per game, scoring the football on offense. In that same span, the defense has given up 13.1 points per game. We'll talk about the defense a little bit in the second segment, but you cannot effectively string together wins when your offense is not putting up more consistent points, regardless of how good your defense is playing or how much your defense is limiting the opposing offense in terms of points. So I think for what Baltimore has overall here, it's an offense that has multiple issues. I mean, another thing here is the fact that just I don't know what in the world. I don't know why I decided to look this up, but I had a feeling. I'm like, I haven't seen the Ravens score a third quarter touchdown in a while. The Ravens have not scored a third quarter touchdown since week 8. We are entering week 18. It has been almost 10 weeks. Baltimore has not scored a third quarter touchdown in almost 10 weeks, right? But in this game here, Mark Andrews had a big day. Mark Andrews did hit, and I want to give a little shout out to myself here because I did predict that Mark Andrews would go for 100 plus yards in this one. He hit 100 on the dot in this one, 9 for 100. Now the rest of the receivers here, Isaiah Likely 3 for 12 and a touchdown. Deshaun Jackson 1 for 9. DeMarcus Robinson 1 for 9. So you have Mark Andrews with 100. The next closest receiver to that was Isaiah Likely, who was a tight end. Obviously, he had 12. Then you have 2 receivers with 1 reception for 9 yards. I mean, Mark Andrews was getting the job done. You know, the Huntley to Andrews connection honestly did look very good. Like, I'm not taking that away, but you do want to see other involvement. But this was obviously a very run-heavy game plan for Baltimore. 28 compared to 21 passes. Actually, that's not as bad as, first glance I thought, but now looking at it, it's honestly not that big of a discrepancy. Baltimore in this game were outgained by Pittsburgh by over 100 yards, 351 to 240. So we'll get into that whole thing. But Baltimore also really couldn't hold on to the ball a lot, partially because Pittsburgh was able to string together some long drives. The Ravens only held the ball for 25 minutes, 46 seconds. Pittsburgh 34 minutes and 14 seconds. Baltimore also had 4 penalties for 30 yards. Pittsburgh actually had more, 6 for 43, but some of those Baltimore penalties were costly. But I don't know, it seemed like they were picking up the yards on the next play pretty well. But regardless, Tyler Huntley in this situation, you know what you're getting in a Tyler Huntley-led offense, and the fact that he's not going to put up 30 points. He's not going to put up 35 points. You have to find a way to grind out a game. And it just seemed like in different situations, the wrong stuff was getting called. Players weren't executing. Again, I'm not going to put everything on play calling. I'm not going to put everything on execution. It is a dual effort. I will say, though, sometimes it's more play calling. Sometimes it is more execution. Sometimes with the play calling, I just didn't know what was going on in terms of what was happening. And then also execution-wise, the players, in some instances, were not getting the job done. But as coaches, you have to put your players in the right position to succeed. I don't know if Baltimore's coaching staff did that on offense for the majority of the night. It's unfortunate that that's a conversation we've had to have a lot on the show over the course of the season, but alas, here we are again, and it cost Baltimore a game. But there are a lot of other things that cost Baltimore this game. It's a team game. In the second segment, we'll dive into the defense, talking about their performance, which had some very good moments, also had some not so good moments. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to dive into on the show. But first, this episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. And I'm super excited to tell you about our new partner and sponsor of today's episode, the mobile game Ultimate Football GM. And if you ever dream of becoming an NFL general manager and managing your football franchise, your dream can come true, and this game is definitely for you. You can manage every strategic aspect of your team. You can play through the season and lead your team to glory. You're responsible for hiring the right coaches and coordinators, trading players, making draft picks, and even navigating your franchise through free agency and the drafts and all the ups and downs of a season. All this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and available offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And the Locked On NFL hosts are having a little competition, so if you want to do the same with your friends or your family, feel free to do so. Locked On Ravens listeners get 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in all caps in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps, so make sure to check it out today. Download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM, start your dynasty today. We return here our second segment of Locked On Ravens following Baltimore's pretty heartbreaking 16-13 defeat to the Pittsburgh Steelers in Week 17. Kevin Oshreicher still here with you. And for what the offense did, both good, some rushing and bad, a lot of other stuff. The Ravens defense also, I'd say, had a pretty up and down game. But I will say this, and I'll lead off with this. I think Baltimore's defense, for the majority of after their bye week, I think the fourth quarter in Jacksonville is one where you can't really give them a pass. That was a pretty bad collapse. They've had a couple of other bad moments here and there. But the Baltimore defense has been dragging this offense across the finish line for a couple of months now. And what you have is a defense that, they're not perfect. We've seen some issues here and there, but they have done enough in most of these football games for the Ravens to win them. You go back to Baltimore's Week 15 loss to Cleveland, 13-3. Baltimore allows just one touchdown in that game. That should be enough. Should be enough with this Ravens offense. And now I know I say that pretty lightly, obviously. In a Tyler Huntley-led offense, you can't guarantee that the team's going to score a lot of points. So I'll rephrase that and say, with a good defense and with a somewhat competent offense, you should be scoring a little more than 13 points. Even in this game here against Pittsburgh in Week 17, the Ravens didn't allow the Steelers to score their first touchdown of this game until 56 seconds left in the fourth quarter. That should be more than enough for a team with a somewhat competent offense and that good defense to win the football game. The Ravens could not win either of those games in Week 15 or Week 17. Both divisional matchups, both games that were circled on the calendar, I'm sure. They could not get the job done. Now, the Ravens in this Pittsburgh game, they got ran all over. Ran all over, and that is a fault of the defense. I will blame the defense for that, right? I'm not saying that the reason the Ravens lost the game was the defense. I think the reason the Ravens lost was the offense. I think that the defense, did their job to the point where only allowing 14.1 points per game since the bye week, that's enough to win you 6 games, 7 games, right? But the Ravens offense has not been up to par this year, was not up to par in this game. The Ravens offense was the reason, or the main reason. It's not just the offense, not just the defense. But Baltimore's defense, they did not have a good day or good night stopping the run. Najee Harris ran all over this team. Pittsburgh, 198 rushing yards in this game. They averaged 4.8 yards per carry on what was coming into this game the third best rush defense in the league. We talked about it. We've talked about it for months and months and months, how it's so hard for opponents to run on this Ravens defense, that the Ravens immediately take that aspect out of the game. Pittsburgh, for the entirety of this game, they did their thing. Credit to them. You have to give credit where it's due in this situation. and Pittsburgh beat the Ravens off the line. I think the offensive line for Pittsburgh was plenty physical. You saw a couple of really nice stand-up plays. I mean, Rashad Nichols had a couple of nice plays. Justin Madubuike did his. He had a sack in this one. But Roger Washington, after the game, called this one embarrassing. And I mean, I don't blame him for thinking so, because for an offense, or for a defense, that prided themselves so much on stopping the run, a performance like that in a big spot, and arguably, we'll have to wait for the Cincinnati game tonight, but what was arguably the second most important game of the season, the rush defense did not show up. And I know they're missing Calais Campbell. I get it. That's a big loss, even though the Ravens were able to weather the storm last week against Atlanta, despite the Falcons picking up some chunk runs here and there. I think Baltimore definitely felt the loss of Calais Campbell on Sunday night. No secret. Najee Harris, 22 carries, 111 yards. Jaylen Warren had 12 for 76. I mean, really, the only thing that was really bringing them down here is Kenny Pickett had 5 for 2. So Najee Harris averaged 5 yards per carry. Jaylen Warren, 6.3. And while the Steelers didn't necessarily pass the ball a ton, I mean, 27 attempts compared to 41 rush attempts. So actually a much bigger discrepancy than Baltimore had pass first rush-wise. Kenny Pickett threw for 168 yards, but you had guys step up in big moments. Pat Freiermuth had a big catch. Deontay Johnson had a really nice catch. Steven Sims, clutch catch late in the fourth quarter. George Pickens had that. George Pickens is going to be so good. He had that amazing catch, and he's going to be a problem. And then you had the running backs also getting involved for Pittsburgh, and Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris. But I think for all things considered, I thought Brandon Stevens made a couple of really nice plays. He stepped up, and I talked actually to Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers from, our crossover show on Thursday. I talked with him for the Locked On NFL episode that I put out today, and he told me, hey, 21 stepped up in some big moments, and I agree with him. He had that play one-on-one on George Pickens, had the other play in the end zone late in the game as well. Those are big-time moments for a player in Brandon Stevens, who I know has had kind of an up-and-down career in Baltimore so far, but I do want to give him a little bit of a shout-out. I know, wasn't a perfect game for him, but he did make a couple of plays, so I want to shout him out there most definitely. But otherwise, defensively, Chuck Clark, 10 total tackles. Marcus Williams, Roquan Smith each had 9. Stevens himself had 8, as well as his 2 pass deflections. Kyle Hamilton, 6. Patrick Queen, 6. But it just seems like, again, the thing that I've been talking about for a while on this show is end of half and end of game defense. And for Baltimore, it was the end of game defense where the ball, Pittsburgh, I think, drove down the field pretty easily. And Pittsburgh, I mentioned the time of possession in the first segment, they were racking up really long drives play-wise. Their first possession of the game, 15 plays. Later, they had 11 plays. Then they had 12 plays, 13 plays, 11 plays again. I mean, on that last possession, Pittsburgh drove down 80 yards in 11 plays in 3 minutes and 20 seconds. You had gains of 7, gains of 20, 28. It was just they were methodically marching down the field, and it was that feeling, it was that sinking feeling. Despite how good the defense has played this year, it just felt like everything was setting up for that Pittsburgh win, despite, again, not allowing Pittsburgh to score a touchdown until there were 56 seconds left in the fourth quarter. And I just keep going back to that stat because I think anytime your defense allows just one touchdown on the day, unless you have the opposing kicker kicking like 6 field goals or something, you should win the game. Your offense should be able to put up more points to be able to win the game. And Pittsburgh's defense, it's not the elite top 2 unit that it's been in the years past here, but they're still a formidable defensive unit, still have some stars, still have guys who can get the job done. I'm not discounting Pittsburgh's defense whatsoever, but the state of the Ravens offense right now is just super concerning. Obviously, when and if, obviously, I know the question, but when Lamar Jackson comes back, it will help. But for now, it's just the defense continuously trying to drag this offense across the finish line, and the defense is not perfect. Again, the rushing thing that happened to them on Sunday night, that is their fault, and that is not good whatsoever. Like, that can't happen, especially in Week 18 here. But for now, I do think the offense does bear more of the blame than the defense at this point, and they have to figure it out fast because we are in Week 18 now. They have one more regular season game. Then it's playoff time. Then you got to really hunker down, and we'll see what type of team this team is, first of all, in Week 18, but then maybe they have to go back to Cincinnati and play them the week after in the wild card round. So we'll see what happens there. And speaking of that, we'll go into our final break here. When we get back, we'll be talking about playoff scenarios, state of this team right now, what needs to change, and more. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to dive into on the show. But first, this episode is brought to you by Built Bar. And if you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, you have to try a Built Bar. We just got done with the holidays, and I know for me, one of my goals is to eat a little bit healthier this year. So if you're like me and you want to eat healthier but don't want to compromise taste, then I've got the thing for you. You just have to try Built Bar. So Built Healthy is actually tasty. They're so delicious you won't even think they're good for you. They're perfect for your New Year's resolution. And what makes the Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they're covered at 100% real chocolate, and they also come in unbelievable flavors like churro, you have peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond as well. They're only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and they're the whopping 17 grams of protein. So if you have a Walmart near you, you can head over there. You can walk to the pharmacy section and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate coconut puff. And if you're close to a Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with their hit flavors such as brownie batter and churro. And you can thank me later for this. Again, you will not regret it. Go and get your hands on Built Bars right now. They're a healthy alternative, and they are so, so good in terms of taste as well. We're back. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostraker, your host, still here with you again. Thank you so much for tuning in with us today. I appreciate it, especially after a loss. I do know how hard it can be. I'm with you. I've been there. So me talking about it does not make it fun, right? It's not fun talking about a loss, but I appreciate everybody who is with me and diving in now to our state of the Ravens, just where they are playoff-wise. Well, obviously, playoff situationally, we did talk about this a bit last week, but with this loss, Baltimore has the chance to be eliminated from AFC North contention, as if the Bengals beat the Bills on Monday night, then the Ravens are out, and they will either be the 5 or the 6 seed. Based off my simulations, I know this can probably be confirmed somewhere else, but I don't think they can fall to 7. I think their only options at the time of this recording, so before Monday night, is either 3, 5, or 6, and then if they end up getting eliminated from the North, it'll be 5 or 6. So there's a possibility that Baltimore, after playing Cincinnati in Week 18, if they drop to 6, let's say, that Baltimore would have to play Cincinnati again in Cincinnati the week after. So competitive advantage, I don't know who it would be or for which team, but that'd be a little wrinkle in there that's interesting. The Bengals, though, have a chance to take the 2 seed from Buffalo. If they get a win here, that would be big in terms of their chances for number 2. So there's a chance that if Baltimore falls to 6, they could play Buffalo in the first round in Buffalo, which I know Buffalo's gone through it a little bit in terms of lately, but Buffalo's no easy task, right? Buffalo's a tough football team. Baltimore obviously lost to them earlier in the season. So I think that obviously Baltimore's easiest path in terms of getting to this divisional, and I know that's not the goal, but getting to the divisional is winning the North. But now they don't have their destiny in their hands right now. They have to hope for help, hope the Buffalo beat Cincinnati, and then hope that they can somehow beat Cincinnati in Week 18. But the way the offense is playing right now, I have barely any confidence in it outside of the run game. The passing offense right now, I mean, sure, if Lamar Jackson comes back, I think that solves some, right? If he can push the ball down the field a little bit, he obviously he's dynamic both with his arm and with his legs, but it doesn't solve everything. You have to be better as a coaching staff. I mean, Greg Roman has to be better. We've talked about it for how many months, how many years, where situationally Greg Roman fails to adjust sometimes in key situations. It happened again against Pittsburgh, and you're just thinking, how can the same thing happen over and over and over again like this? And it just stays the same. I think for me, I'll state my stance again. I know for the people who've been listening to me here for a long time, you know where I stand on this. For the people who are new, I just want to put it out there again. My number one thing is complacency. Complacency is a word I use a lot. What I mean by that is the Ravens made the playoffs, right? That's awesome. It's an achievement in itself, but that's not the goal. And for Baltimore, 2018, they make it to the wild card round. Lamar's rookie season, they get eliminated. Sure. 2019, they have the bye, get to the divisional round, they get eliminated without winning a playoff game. 2020, they win the playoff game. They get over that hump. They progress, but then they lose in a divisional round again. 2021, it's a wash for me. I don't really count it because of the injuries. It wasn't a full team in any stretch. But in 2022, I have stated that this is an AFC Championship or bust season for this team. And right now, they are not playing like a team that can make it even remotely close to an AFC Championship. Do they have the talented pieces around at many positions? Sure. Is it a perfect roster? No. It's not a perfect roster. No team has a perfect roster, but there are holes, multiple positions. We've talked about wide receivers, but you have to work with what you have. And right now, even with what Baltimore has, the offense, they can't put up points. They're having trouble converting in the red zone. It's been a mess for the majority of after the bye week. And again, that was even with Lamar in there, where against Carolina, they struggled. Fourth quarter of Jacksonville, that was a nice spark, but then Lamar gets injured and he's been down ever since. So for Tyler Huntley, again, I think he is a fine backup for what you want. But again, what I talked about, you know what you're getting in the Tyler Huntley-led offenses where they're not putting up all the points in the world. But you have to put up more than 13 points, more than 3 points, more than 10 points in that situation. Because especially in the playoffs, you're not playing. We talked so much. We talked so much about how easy Baltimore's schedule was relative to record, right? Obviously, no game in the NFL is going to be easy. Teams are going to put up a fight. These are NFL talents. These are NFL organizations. Any given Sunday, right? But we talked about the strength of schedule. We talked about that stretch of Carolina, Jacksonville, Denver, all these teams where you're thinking, all right, these will probably be somewhat decent, matchups for the Ravens where they'll be able to, maybe if not blow them out, win by a decent amount and kind of get some momentum. There's been no momentum. There's been no momentum for them. And look, they've been winning games, right, to an extent, but they've now lost 2 of their last 3. They head into arguably their most, and in fact, this is their most important and their toughest matchup of the year in Cincinnati against the red-hot Bengals team. And who knows, maybe that changes after week 17. Maybe Cincinnati puts up a stinker and that's that. But you have to play better if you're the Ravens. John Harbaugh went up on that podium after the game on Sunday night and just he looked disappointed. He looked defeated. He blamed it on the coaching staff. He said that the number one thing is that the coaches did not have the players ready. And I mean, I agree with them to an extent. It's not all on the coaches, right? The players did play a role in this. The execution was not up to standard, much like the coaching was not up to standard. But again, it's the same thing we've been talking about here. And that's where my complacency thing comes back into the equation, because we have talked about it. And I laid it out before the season where mistakes happen, right? No team is perfect. You're going to have things that you're not good at throughout a season. You're going to have things that you definitely have to improve on throughout a season. But we have seen very minimal, if any, improvement in some areas. And now there is very little time to try to correct it. You hope to have your star quarterback back for week 18, but who knows the situation with him right now. I know it's extremely tight-lipped coming out of the castle. So they need him in this Bengals game. They really, really do. But is he healthy enough to play? That's a really big thing. Can they convert in the red zone? Can they do enough so that if they are a wild card team, if the Bengals do win tonight, if they're a wild card team, do you feel confident in them going up against Cincinnati again? Do you feel confident against them playing against the Bills, or even if they're the 5 seed, matching up against a Jacksonville or a Tennessee? I think for me, I talked about playoff matchups last week. I think for me, Tennessee, if they can somehow win the South and Baltimore gets the 5, I think that's the easiest path for me. But the reality of the situation is you're going to probably have to play a Kansas City or a Buffalo or a Cincinnati, two of the big 3, as people are now calling them. I saw that on Twitter, and so apparently that's what we're doing. But you have Kansas City, Buffalo, and Cincinnati as the big 3 in the AFC right now. We were thinking before the season, maybe Baltimore could be up in that big 3, but they have fallen from that. Now they have, it's the underdog story again. Not a lot of people believe in this team right now. Can they do enough to prove not only themselves, but to the rest of the world that they can be competitors here? Because right now this offense is not getting that job done. For as well as the defense has played for key stretches of this, I guess, after bye week, it's not been perfect for them, but with them only giving up 13.1 points per game, you should have, I think, a better record than Baltimore has, especially after the bye in terms of, fourth quarter in Jacksonville, not great by the defense, but that Cleveland game they should have won in terms of the defense's performance. The Pittsburgh game, I think, even though the rushing performance happened, Baltimore, again, you just got to score more than 16. You score 17 points to win that game. It's the NFL is hard. Plenty of stuff that goes into a performance offensively, defensively, but it just feels like for Baltimore, they need a lot. They need a lot to happen in order for them to be considered by many as true contenders right now, because even though they've made the playoffs, it cannot just stop with another wild card exit or another divisional exit. It has to be more than that, or else you're just feeding into the complacency narrative where it's, we made the playoffs, but we got eliminated in the division round again. Oops, let's do it again next year. That cannot happen, especially when you have a talent like Lamar Jackson. You can't waste a talent like Lamar Jackson if you're the Ravens. You can't do it, and I know some will argue that they have, but for right now, you got to focus on this. And for Baltimore, a huge Week 18 matchup against Cincinnati after falling in Week 17 to Pittsburgh. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll get back here tomorrow. We're diving into more Ravens content as always, so be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you right back here tomorrow.